Now I realized that during our prayer time that um, Barbara brought up Mary as the mother of Christ. A lot of times people will focus on that on Mother's Day. I'm not doing that. I'm actually focusing on the mother of Moses, and just to see, because for first of all, because she's talked about in both the Old Testament and in the New Testament, talking about it, and I thought it was actually relevant to where we're at. So, contemplating motherhood can make some us sentimental. So, a young man was walking through a supermarket to pick up a few items when he noticed a little old lady following him around. Okay, so thinking nothing of it, he more or less ignored her and he continued. And finally, when he went to the checkout line, she sort of scooted right in front of him. And she said, "Oh, pardon me, Sonny. I'm sorry if my staring at you has made you feel uncomfortable. It's just that you look a lot like my son, who I haven't seen in a long time." "Oh, that's a shame," replied the young man. "Is there anything I can do for you?" "Yes," she said. "As I'm leaving, can you say goodbye, Mother? It would make me feel so much better." "Sure," answered the young man, and as the older woman was leaving, he called out, "Goodbye, Mother." And she waved and actually blew him a kiss. And as he stepped up to the checkout counter, he saw that his total was $127.50. "How can that be?" he asked. "I only purchased a few things." "Well, your mother said that you would pay for her," said the clerk. Now, many mothers are blessed with families that resemble either what we just talked about and or the cleaver. I know I'm aging myself, but how many of you have seen Leave It to Beaver or know of this? Okay, so quite a few. That's good. Uh, some are blessed with families that resemble the Cleavers on Leave It to Beaver, but many and perhaps most mothers must face tough challenges. Not all little ladies are sweet, and not all mothers are wonderful. Some of you had awful mothers, and you have my sympathies. It can be hard for you to hear motherhood equated to with angelic behavior when that was not your experience. So please bear with the rest of us who've been blessed with amazing mothers. We celebrate our mothers, yet we do so with awareness that our lot may have been different from yours. And in this room, I think we fit into all those different categories. Some mothers did great, some mothers disappeared, some mothers weren't around, some weren't. Uh, Julie and I just watched a show last night, Sism sermon, because we watched it last night, so it just came to me. Uh, but it was about some cowgirls, and one cowgirl finds out at age 18 that she was adopted, and she goes and ends up finding her mother. In the end, the mother said, "Now you know why I left you with who I did, because she wasn't such a great mom and all." But it was a tough thing for her to find out when her adopted parents treated her fantastically and all. But even if you've gotten adopted out, or your mom wasn't exactly the most stellar mom, even at that, I realized that even with this movie, it portrayed that she still loved the girl as our own mothers loved us. Sometimes people don't know how to share or demonstrate that love with people. And I'm sure people in this room sometimes have those same complications of sharing your love with, whether it be your kids, your grandkids, or just your neighbor and stuff. Sometimes we have a tough time doing that ourselves. So we need to look towards our mothers and being as a mother. And by the way, fathers too, by the way, get this, guys, okay? And fathers too, okay? That we need to be more like Christ, and we need to love even when it doesn't seem like the easiest thing to do. Okay, commercial over. So today I'd like to challenge our mothers, grandmothers, and future mothers by helping us appreciate some of the diverse challenges of motherhood. Many modern mothers are not in or were not grown up in a Leave It to Beaver family. And this is far from a Leave It to Beaver world. Okay, they tried to show the perfect family there is what that was about. And Beaver was the young boy's name that was there. Mothers, can you imagine how it would feel if you were pregnant and the authorities in your country made a decree that every male born would be thrown into the river like nothing more than a piece of trash? Sadly, we also have this same thing in what we call abortion today. But I want to let you know this actually happened, by the way. In Exodus 1, verse 22, it says, "Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people: throw every newborn Hebrew boy into the Nile River, but you may let the girls live." In chapter 2 of Exodus, it opens up with a wedding and a birth announcement. And sure enough, it was a son. But there was something different about this child. So chapter 2, verse 1 and 2 says, "About this time, a man and woman from the tribe of Levi got married. The woman became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She saw that it was a special baby and kept it hidden for 3 months." Now, by the way, the government said, hey, the boys have to be thrown into the Nile. So she takes a big risk and she hides the child. But the reality is, after 3 months, it was a little bit harder to hide the child. She knew she couldn't continue doing it. But we're going to continue in Exodus 2, verses 3 through 10, and explain a little bit about, tell you what happened. So, but when she could no longer hide him, she got a basket made of papyrus reeds and waterproofed it with tar and pitch. Not exactly what we're used to doing today with baskets, putting them and putting tar and pitch on it so it could go in the water is what it was about. She put the baby in the basket and laid it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile River. The baby's sister then stood at a distance watching to see what would happen. Soon, Pharaoh was the king. He was considered a god by the people then too, but Pharaoh was the one in charge. So soon Pharaoh's daughter came to bathe in the river, and her attendants walked along the riverbank. When the princess saw the basket among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it for her. When the princess opened it, she saw the baby. The little boy was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This must be one of the Hebrew children," she said. Then the baby's sister approached the princess. "Should I go find one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" she asked. "Yes, do," the princess replied. So the girl went and called the baby's mother. "Take this baby and nurse him for me," the princess told the baby's mother. "I will pay you for your help." I just lost my spot. There we go. I'll pay. So the woman took her baby home and nursed him. Later, when the boy was older, it's anticipated between 4 and 6. Don't know the exact time there. His mother brought him back to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her own son. The princesses named him Moses, for she explained, "I lifted him out of the water." In the earliest and formative years, God allowed Moses, who was to be thrown into the water, who Mama was smart enough to put him in the water in a basket, to be even though he was picked up by the Pharaoh's daughter, a princess of Egypt, she didn't just get to teach him. She got paid to teach him and take care of him until the time and explain different things to him until the time officially that he was able to go and be adopted. And his mother's name was Jochebed. Okay. In Exodus 6, verse 20, Amram married his father's sister Jochebed, and she gave birth to his sons, Aaron and Moses. Amram lived to be 137 years old. In that part, it's going through the lineage of how these things came about. And yes, he married his father's sister, not like what would be going on today, but that was a time before, which it wasn't such an odd thing within families for that to happen. But her name is Jochebed. So we're talking about Mother Jochebed of Moses. So, how did Jochebed do in rearing her son? According to Hebrews, she must have been quite a mother. What an impact she had on her son. What an impact Moses made for God during his life. He became one of the greatest leaders in the history of the world. He was a difference maker for God. Mothers, are you influencing and impacting your child's life, hopefully for good and for God? But you are influencing them no matter which way you look at it. Are you a proper role model for them? What made Jochebed such a great mother? Well, there's 4 verses in Hebrews 11, 20 through to 26, which I'll read in a moment, will give us insight into answering that question. And how did Jochebed raise such a difference maker for God? So we're going to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 23 through 26. This is what I was talking about back in the Old Testament. It explains how Moses' mother dealt with things. And then it's brought up again after Christ's resurrection as sorry. So it was by faith that Moses' parents hid him for 3 months. When he was born, they saw that God had given them an unusual child, and they were not afraid to disobey the king's command. It was by faith that Moses, when he grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to share the oppression of God's people instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin. He thought it was better to suffer for the sake of Christ than to own the treasures in Egypt, for he was looking ahead to his great reward. So first of all, Jochebed taught Moses that God can always be trusted. That was verse 23 there. That is what faith is. It's in placing our trust and our confidence in God. She taught Moses this by example, not just by telling him, but by example also. She knew when she hid him for 3 months, when she placed him by the river, where actually the interesting thing about that being placed in the river in that little basket that was made up as a floating basket for him, she was actually placing him into the river of death that other children were being thrown into. And then when she finally had to hand him over to Pharaoh's daughter, she had confidence and faith in God, that God would take care of that child. Their confidence in God was stronger than their fear of the king as it's talked about again in verse 23. They were not afraid to disobey the king's command. Why? Well, I'm sure Moses encountered scary situations. Think about that before Pharaoh, knowing the end story when he finally went and confronted Pharaoh. And then he got to the Red Sea and it was there and God opened it up. That was pretty scary that you get there, the sea's there and the troops are coming behind you. We can imagine that he thought back to his godly mother and said, my mother was not afraid to disobey the king's commandment. So he could too say what we now find in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 6, which is, so we can say with confidence, the Lord is my helper, so I will have no fear. What can mere people do to me? So today, we need mothers who will be women of faith. Mothers, grandmothers. Are you teaching your children and grandchildren to put their confidence in God? Barb spoke up today, which was kind of awesome. She had sent that to me, and I appreciate that. Barb, I'm going to use you as an example, and I didn't tell you. Sorry. But you'll be okay with it. At least I hope so. If not, I did. Todd, did you bring those eggs in case she asked? No, never. Sorry, I said it. Sorry. Leave that go. Okay. Are you teaching your children or grandchildren to put confidence in God? We have a list of people that we're praying for. If you look on that list, there's two names in a row on there. One's in red and one's in black. Oakland and Lincoln. Those are her grandchildren. Oakland came to Christ a few weeks ago. That's why he's on the front part too. Okay? Lincoln, she's still sharing Christ with. So his grandma, they know she knows Christ, and she wants them to know Christ. We all should be doing that with our own children and or grandchildren. Thank you, Barb. I'm sure we see our children are full of worry and fear, our grandchildren. You see you trying to manipulate do they see you trying to manipulate your own circumstances? Moms, do you and your children see you trusting God and walking by faith with him? That you need to answer on your own there. So secondly, she taught Moses to stand firm on his conviction. As we saw in verse 24, when Moses became a man, the Bible says it was by faith that Moses, when he grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. If Moses allowed himself to be called her son, it'd be like turning his back on his family, on his nation, and on his God. Moses refused to do it. His mother obviously instilled in him some firm convictions. She too was a lady of firm beliefs. By the way, Webster's defines convictions as firm beliefs. The lady of convictions, firm beliefs. As we look at our culture, it's obvious that many children are growing up with no convictions whatsoever. They're being desensitized to evil and the line between right and wrong. It's actually been very blurry to the point that it's almost non-existent anymore. Children are being indoctrinated in the idea of amorality, which actually means there are no moral absolutes. By the way, folks, there are. No matter what school, teachers, the media tell you. There is only one hope for your children, moms and dads, and you're it. To share Christ with them. The hope is in Jesus Christ. You need to share that with them. You must instill in them a strong Bible-based convictions. You must teach them to say no to illicit sex, drugs, dishonesty, cursing, disrespect, filthy movies. Parents, you must teach your kids to love God, to trust His word, and to pray. Just like we talk about here, the things that we believe as a church we should be doing, you should be instilling in your kids and your grandchildren. Third, Jochebed taught Moses to make the right choices. As per verse 25 there, Moses had a very clear choice. He could suffer affliction while doing right, or enjoy the pleasures of sin while doing wrong. Moses, hey, he made the right choice. And by the way, he didn't always make the right choice. He screwed up some too, okay? He was not perfect. Okay, he screwed up, but he also repented and moved forward, okay? Did you know that kids must be taught to make the right choices? I realize I've talked to some parents say, well, we're going to let them make up their own mind about God and about other things. By the time you do that, they've already been influenced by everybody else. Why would they listen to you if you didn't say anything? Okay. How do we help them make the right choices? We teach them that their choices should always be based on the Bible, on God's word. The Bible is not a suggestion box. It's our authority and has the final say on everything. We don't make choices based on what friends are doing or what TV or the internet. You know, I saw it on Google. It must be okay. Yeah, not. We don't make our choices on what's easy or socially acceptable, or the other thing is by what feels right. Because usually our feelings are not necessarily always right. We need to teach them that the most important decision in life is to accept Jesus Christ as their Savior. That's whether you as a person did that when you were younger, middle age, or even at the very end of life. Do the best to share that with them as being salvation is a choice. And if kids don't make that choice early, the odds diminish. Teach them that their choices have long range consequences. You know, think about this, which I realize we know Moses is the hero, the one that led the people out of Egypt, and God allowed him, parted the Red Sea for him, did many other miracles, okay? But think about this for a moment. Had Moses made the wrong choice, he could have actually been one of Pharaoh's generals, swallowed up by the Red Sea while somebody else delivered Israel out of it. Teach them that right choices sometimes mean sacrifice. Making the right choice may mean losing a friend, money, a better position, a boyfriend or girlfriend, popularity. Yet we suffer if we suffer for righteousness. It always brings glory. And the glory isn't necessarily to ourselves, it's to our God. In Romans 8, verse 18, it says, "Yet what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory He will reveal to us later." Parents, you need to set the example. Do your children see you willing to suffer to make the right choices? If you're going to make the right choices, you must have a clear vision, looking into the future, as per verse 26 that we'd read. Moses was faced with a choice, treasures, and had a clear vision because he looked into the future and made the right choice. As a godly mother, you have to see each child as gifted by God for something special. And that's when Jochebed looked in the eyes of Moses. She saw more than a 3-month-old baby. She saw a deliverer. who would one day rise up to bring change and relief to the people of God. She saw it as a godly mother sees the potential because she looks for it. So start looking today. By the way, bringing up Mary again, they went through the same thing. There was the decree to kill the baby boys. They had to flee and go to Egypt. She did look at some of those same things. When you look into the face of your children, what are you seeing? Are you seeing greatness? What are you speaking over them? Their father may be a deadbeat kind of guy, but don't speak that over them. Speak life into them. Now, by the way, because we're talking about Moses, each of my statements are going to say, tell the boy. It's referring to Moses, but this applies to both boys and girls. Please understand that. Okay? Tell the boy from an early age that he will become a blessing to the family. Tell him that he will be the first one in the family to grace the palace and rub shoulders with royalty. Tell him that he will be the first one in the family to write 5 books. Tell him that he will impact this country in a way like no other has done before. Tell him that God is preparing him to change the political landscape of the country. Even when they act up and are a little hard to handle, I'm sure we've all dealt with that as parents. Okay? Keep on speaking good things into their life. For my Bible tells me that life and death are in the power of the tongue. So be supportive of your children, even when they're not under your roof. They're going out on their own. Learn how to be cooperative with those whom God has placed in your lives of your children. Help you rear them in a way that is pleasing unto the Lord. I had mentioned earlier when we prayed, I'm blessed that both my parents and Julie's parents ended up in the end being godly people. They grew up as good people, but they ended up being godly people, and that influenced Julie and myself. And Julie and myself have been together, and we've been a blessing to be able to influence our children, but also our children's friends who came and were at our house like every Friday and different times. And now as they've grown up, they're calling back and hey, what about this? Hey, we happen to be blessed to be able to do that. Are we perfect? No, we aren't. But God allowed us. No, thanks, Kenny, but thank you. It's just using it as an example that God used us not just to be a blessing to our own kids, family, but also to others. What God's asking you to do, children, grandchildren, etc. I realize Kathy is actually being an influence to people that she doesn't even know, that know her son, who's a mighty man for God up in pastor in one of our jails. She's being able to pour into other people. Serve a mighty God that allows us to do that if we so choose. We need to rear them in a way that is pleasing unto the Lord. Get them involved in a church. Listening to school if they're going or through homeschooling. Listening to Grammy, okay, as those of you may be in this room, and so many others that are there for people and institutions that God has placed in our lives to help raise our children. We need to embrace them if they are raising in a godly manner. Sometimes that gets a little dicey there on the cutting edge of things, what's good, bad, and indifferent, what's godly, what's being taught. You have to determine. Moms, you have an opportunity to teach your children to not live for the moment, but to look to the future and see how their choices will affect them. Mothers, your consistent example is a powerful teaching tool. Godly difference makers are not raised by accident. Hear that. Godly difference makers are not raised by accident. Just as Moses was raised by Jochebed, Be a godly mother, grandmother, parent, as she was. So we're going to finish up by praying for the mothers today. So, Lord, I just praise you and thank you that here, as a small church, a small family, that we have mothers here with us that are mothers, grandmothers. I ask that, Lord, through this, you encourage them to, first of all, follow you and be the example to their children, to their children's children, and to the children's friends and other families, that your name may be exalted because of their godliness, obeying you. That's your blessing in Jesus' name. Amen.